23,000 casualties. That's how many men fell in just 2 days at a place no one had heard of, beside a log church called Shiloh. It wasn't noble, it wasn't clean. It was slaughter on a scale America had never seen. And in Washington, D.C., Abraham Lincoln realized something horrifying. This wasn't a war that could be won by restoring the old Union. He would have to gamble everything, including the very soul of the nation. In the spring of 1862, the Civil War was supposed to be almost over. Both North and South had marched off the year before, sure they'd return home in a few months, victorious and proud. But then came Shiloh, a brutal, muddy bloodbath in the Tennessee woods that crushed that fantasy. It didn't just horrify the country. It set off a chain reaction, one that would push Abraham Lincoln to the boldest, most dangerous decision of his presidency. If you're into the hidden turning points that shaped history, drop a like, and let's dive into the moment that transformed a war for unity into a revolution for freedom. By mid-1862, the Union was in serious trouble. Out east, General George McClellan, cautious to a fault, had blown his chance to take Richmond during the Peninsula Campaign. After a string of brutal clashes called the 7 Days Battles, he retreated. Then came Second Bull Run, another disaster. Confederate confidence soared. Northern morale collapsed. In the White House, Lincoln walked a tightrope. Privately, he hated slavery. "If slavery is not wrong," he wrote, "nothing is wrong." But publicly, he insisted the war was only about preserving the Union. Why? Because 4 slaveholding border states, like Kentucky and Missouri, were still loyal. Losing them could end the war overnight. As Lincoln said, "I hope to have God on my side, but I must have Kentucky." But there was another storm brewing: Europe. Britain and France were eyeing the Confederacy, desperate for Southern cotton, and ready to recognize the South as a sovereign nation. That would mean foreign money, weapons, maybe even troops. Lincoln was boxed in. Radical Republicans demanded abolition. Conservatives threatened rebellion if he touched slavery. And the public? Tired, bleeding, losing faith. He needed a bold move. But first, he needed a win. In September 1862, Confederate General Robert E. Lee handed Lincoln the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Lee invaded the North, marching his army into Maryland. He hoped to win a major victory on Union soil, to break Northern morale and force Britain and France to act. But outside a quiet town called Sharpsburg, near a creek named Antietam, Union forces finally caught him. What followed was the bloodiest single day in American history. 12 hours of non-stop carnage, a 24-acre cornfield shredded by gunfire. A sunken country road turned into a trench of corpses. Bloody Lane. Soldiers fell in rows. The fields were soaked red. By nightfall, over 22,000 men were dead, wounded, or missing. Neither side claimed true victory, but Lee was forced to retreat. It wasn't the crushing win Lincoln wanted, but it was enough. It was the opening he needed to unleash his gamble. If you're still watching and learning something new, go ahead and subscribe. We break down these critical moments that changed everything. Just 5 days after Antietam, Lincoln made his move. On September 22, 1862, he issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, a document he'd been holding for months. His Secretary of State had warned him, don't release it after a loss. It would look like desperation. Now, after a strategic win, it looked bold, presidential, powerful, and Lincoln didn't frame it as moral redemption. He framed it as war strategy. A fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion. This was Lincoln's great gamble. One document, 2 devastating effects. First, it attacked the South from within. On January 1, 1863, all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory would be thenceforward and forever free. This didn't apply to the border states. Another sign that this was cold strategy, not just idealism. The proclamation gave enslaved people a reason to escape, to undermine the Southern economy, and it authorized the Union Army to recruit black soldiers. By war's end, nearly 200,000 African Americans would fight for the Union. The South couldn't compete with that. Second, it checkmated the Confederacy on the world stage. By turning the war into a fight against slavery, Lincoln made it politically impossible for Britain or France, both anti-slavery nations, to side with the South. Supporting the Confederacy now meant supporting slavery, and no European government could sell that to its people. Just like that, foreign aid vanished. Lincoln had changed the rules of the war and flipped the board. Lincoln's proclamation was more than a policy shift. It was a point of no return. The war wasn't just about stitching the Union back together. It was about what kind of Union would emerge from the fire. But here's a question for you. What do you think was the Civil War's biggest turning point? Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. And if you're finding this fascinating, drop a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next moment that changed history. The river of blood that flowed in 1862, from the forests of Shiloh to the fields of Antietam, forced a terrible reckoning. It proved this war wouldn't be won by restoring the old ways. It had to become something more. And Lincoln, standing on the edge of disaster, bet it all on emancipation. He changed the war, he changed the country, and in the end, he changed the future. What began as a war for unity became a fight for the soul of the nation. As Lincoln would later say at Gettysburg, it was a battle for a new birth of freedom. And that transformation came at a cost almost too great to bear.